Chris Kreider comes up clutch in a 3-2 win over the Boston Bruins. Plus, we take a look at the massive impact that JT Miller has made on the Rangers, and how will the team get by without Adam Edstrom?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1242 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I think we could all kind of get used to this trend that's starting to reestablish itself for the Rangers right now, namely that this team is actually coming back in games, actually showing some fight, actually showing some guts. This is something that was so prevalent for this team throughout the entire season, really the entire postseason last year. And this year, it seems like they get down in a game and they just don't come back. But now, a couple of recent third period comeback wins. It's something that had not happened much at all this entire campaign, but it's happening recently, and not a moment too soon with the Rangers obviously on the outside of the playoff picture looking in and trying to track down one of those last couple of spots there. And obviously a big win here against the Bruins. This is one of the teams that obviously the Rangers are trying to catch. The fact that they beat them in regulation to me is an added bonus because that means that Boston doesn't get any points. And if you beat them in overtime, okay, good, but you didn't gain as much ground as maybe you could have. So there's that to consider as well. But the biggest moment of the game, we get really, I was going to say a maligned Ranger in Chris Kreider coming through in the clutch, but really it was three different maligned Rangers that came through in the clutch. It was K'Andre Miller, Mika Zibanejad, and Chris Kreider all in this moment. I'm going to elaborate on that in just a second and break down the play, but it's just funny because, you know, you're all fired up watching this play. Obviously, you know, a shorthanded goal late in the game gives the Rangers a 3-2 lead in a big spot. And you know, you're really going into that penalty kill, just kind of hoping that the Rangers can get through it, get back to even strength, then maybe try to find the equalizer from there. Rangers were in a tough spot here. Rempe basically got a 2-minute penalty for being bigger than his opponent. This one was maybe a little bit borderline, but I don't know. I mean, you're in a tight game, big game on the schedule. That looked a little bit ticky-tack to me, and it looked like, you know, maybe Rempe had been targeted by the officials. So that wasn't ideal, but the Rangers nevertheless came through with a shorthanded goal, which is something that, as much as they've struggled this season, the penalty kill remains a strength, and that ability to score a shorty every now and then, or at least get some good scoring chances while shorthanded, that's pretty much remained intact for the Rangers the entire season. One of the only positive things about last year that's remained intact for the entire season this year. But, you know, even before they got this shorthanded goal, we saw the Rangers get a couple of good looks at the net while they were shorthanded. Adam Fox in particular. I want to say it was Mika that sent a pass his way early in the game, and he got a good shot away. It was stopped, but there were kind of some foreshadowing clues, I guess you could say, early in this game that the Rangers might have a shorthanded goal up their sleeve, and they get one here. But to go ahead and break down this goal, again, it's the result of three players that have come under fire from Ranger fans all making a play. Now, this podcast is no exception. I've had certain things to say about how all three of these guys have played, K'Andre Miller, Mika Zibanejad, and Chris Kreider, and not all of them have been pleasant. Not all of them have been friendly things that I've said on here. I stand by every single thing that I've said about these three players this season. There have certainly been games, chunks of games, large portions of the season where you frankly just need these guys to play a heck of a lot better and look a heck of a lot engaged than they have at other times in the season. But I thought, you know, certainly Mika played better in this game. I thought Miller had a decent game. Kreider was kind of, he wasn't the most noticeable player, but we certainly noticed him in this instance here. And again, just a big time shorthanded goal as a result of three players all making plays that have come under fire, you know, from Ranger fans earlier this season. You know, to kind of break down the play here again, Matt Rempe is in the penalty box. The Rangers are shorthanded. Didn't agree with that call. Not going to go crazy about it either, but to me, a little bit ticky-tack given the situation in the game. But Igor makes a couple of tough saves, you know, somewhat early in this power play for the Boston Bruins. That keeps the game tied. And then you have the Rangers off to the races on a rush. Chris Kreider ends up scoring shorthanded with just 9 seconds to go in the Bruins power play. But this is all started by a great play by K'Andre Miller in the defensive zone, a great stick to knock the puck loose, knock it away from his opponent. And Miller is then able to get a really short pass over to Adam Fox. And then Fox makes another short pass, leading Mika Zibanejad up the ice and out of the Ranger zone. So Mika's going straight up the center of the ice. He eventually gets the blue line, veers to his right. And by this point, Kreider enters your screen looking like he was absolutely fired out of a cannon on this play. He goes straight for the net. Mika makes the cross ice pass. It actually did get deflected a little bit by one of the Bruins defenders, but it eventually, nevertheless, made its way over to Kreider. Kreider did a nice job stopping it with his skate and then took the shot, buried it, and gave the Rangers a 3-2 lead, close out the scoring with the eventual game-winning goal there. So this is awesome. Don't get me wrong. This is a huge moment in this game, possibly a big moment in the Rangers season as well. We won't know until the season is over because this is a big win. And is this the one of the wins late in the season here that eventually gets the Rangers into one of the last couple of playoff spots? We don't know yet. We'll know soon enough. Before we blink, the playoffs will be upon us. But this also makes me it raises some questions for me regarding Chris Kreider. And I certainly don't want to be negative here because this was a huge win, clutch moment here for Kreider, for Mika, for K'Andre Miller. Once again, 3 players that have come under fire from Ranger fans. But this is also, I think, just a prime perfect example of why Chris Kreider drives Ranger fans crazy. I think for the most part, this fan base can appreciate the longevity, understand the fact that he has been a very important player for this team for a lot of different years. He's been a part of a bunch of different deep playoff runs. He's had some big playoff moments over the years. But you watch something like this, you watch how fast he's moving, how hard he's skating, how determined he is to get to the net, his ability to slow down the puck even after it was deflected by a Boston player, get control of it, put the shot at the net, roof it, and get that goal there. You see him do all that, and it's like, okay, well, where does this go? Where does this go for games at a time, sometimes weeks at a time, hell, months at a time this season? He wasn't the only one, but this entire team basically just stopped playing hockey for November and December. So where do these Chris Kreider abilities go when we go so long without seeing them? Because you see this, and it's just that reminder of, oh, right, he's got this in him. Chris Kreider can still be that dude. He's a little bit older now. He's 33, but he's certainly not ancient. And we've seen many players have great seasons, much older than just 33. So I can't chalk it up to that. Is it the injury? We know that Kreider this season has been dealing with a bad back, and he had to sit out for a couple of games due to that. But maybe there's a situation here where, due to the bad back, Kreider can only kind of pick and choose when he skates like he did on this play. That's at least possible. But it's just so weird watching him go through these kind of lackadaisical stretches, and then all of a sudden he makes an all-star caliber play here, and again, it's possible that it can be chalked up to the bad back, but he looks more determined and even more likely to score when the Rangers are shorthanded than he does at even strength. And that's something that you could spend a lifetime trying to figure that out. We just don't see bursts like this. We don't see explosive drives into the offensive zone from Chris Kreider anywhere near as often as we should. And again, that's what kind of, I think, gets Ranger fans all worked up about Kreider. I include myself in this because you see this and it's like, yes, he has that ability in him. Let's see that dude night in and night out, because you got to believe it's still in there somewhere. And every now and then Kreider just pulls this out of himself. And again, maybe it is down to the injury. Maybe that does slow him down more than we realize. For all we know, this dude is in agonizing pain every single day. And again, like I said earlier, he has to kind of just pick and choose when he can skate like this and make plays like this. But I don't know, man. It's maddening, the inconsistency that you see from Kreider. But for one night at least, we'll give him a little bit of a break. He made a huge play here, got the game-winning goal for the Rangers, and did so as a result of just pure hustle, flying up the ice like his life depended on it, and handling a pass that got deflected on the way there and burying his shot as well. There were some funny quotes after the game about the game-winning goal. I figured I'd go ahead and share them with you guys here. We got to have some fun on here. This has not been, if we're looking at this objectively, this has not been one of the more fun Ranger seasons. It's always fun when they win, but they got a clutch victory here against a team that they needed to beat. So let's enjoy a couple of funny quotes from the Rangers after this game. Vincent Trocheck was asked about the chemistry between Kreider and Mika, And this is what he had to say about them and that goal that was scored there. He says, obviously, they've been playing together for 46 years, so they definitely have some chemistry. Yeah, I think Vinny might have overshot that one a little bit, but that was pretty funny nevertheless. Yeah, they've been together forever. I think Mika now more than 10 years with the Rangers, and obviously that's also true of Kreider. There was also Mika Zibanejad being asked about this goal, and he asked if he, when he saw Kreider joining him on the rush there while they were shorthanded, and he just said, you can hear him. And apparently he then elaborated on that and said that Kreider wasn't really calling for the puck, but he can just hear Kreider by the way that he skates. And it sounds funny at first, but then you think about it, it's like, well, these two have been playing together for more than 10 years. I can actually believe that. You get so used to somebody and playing on the same line as them. At a certain point, yeah, I'm sure you do hear the way that they skate, and you just kind of know that he's going to be there. And like clockwork, Kreider was there. Mika got it over to him. The pass was deflected, but it got there. And Kreider handled it and did the rest. And big goal for the Rangers. One of the biggest plays, I think, that Mika and Kreider, and we could throw Miller in there too, making the defensive play to get this whole thing started. One of the biggest plays that all three of them have made the entire season. Given where they are in the standings, the fact that they're trying to climb into a playoff spot, and the fact that they rallied to get a big win here against one of the teams that they've got to pass if they're going to go ahead and do that. So, yeah, huge play there, obviously. In just a second, we're going to shift our attention to the newest member of the New York Rangers. That's JT Miller. Going to continue to talk about the massive impact that he's made on this team and why his addition to this team has made such an impact. And we'll get to all that good stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates all the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of ticket listings. The best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they will refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation operations if something comes up. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out to the everydayers. As always, the Rangers are going to be back in action on, let's see, that would be, I have it written down somewhere here. Yeah, of course. Friday at 7 o'clock. They've got 2 games left before the break for the Four Nations Classic. Your home Penguins on Friday at 7, and then you are at Jackets on Saturday at 7. So we're going to break down whatever happens against the Penguins in the next episode. But for right now, let's keep the attention on this game, and specifically the newest New York Ranger, and that would, of course, be JT Miller. I just feel like it's only 3 games. It honestly feels like this is JT Miller's team already. It might be a slight exaggeration, but it's not much of one. This guy has come in and made an impact. He goes out there and he competes very hard every single shift, every single game. That's been on full display for the first 3 games that he's played with the Rangers here. We're going to talk about his performance in this game. As a quick aside, though, I would not be surprised to see JT Miller wearing a letter next season. Some people I know are already trying to anoint him the next Ranger captain. I wouldn't go that far. I think I'd stick with Trocheck. I would have JT Miller as an alternate, though. And that sounds like an episode for somewhere down the road. Maybe during the Four Nations pause here, we'll talk about that. The guys that should be wearing the letters next season for the New York Rangers. I think that could be a lot of fun. But for right now, let's just focus on what Miller did in this game and what he's done since coming over to the New York Rangers. Back to the New York Rangers, of course. So there was a goal scored in this game. The first goal that the Rangers scored, where JT Miller doesn't get an assist. But again, this kind of goes back to the play with K'Andre Miller that we talked about a minute ago, which led to the Kreider goal. If Miller doesn't make that play, K'Andre Miller, the Kreider goal doesn't happen. If JT Miller does not make this play, then the goal by Artemi Panarin does not happen. So JT, again, we're going to try to go first names with JT Miller and K'Andre Miller, but I'm going to have to really rewire my brain for that one. But anyway, JT dumps the puck, goes in on the forecheck, kind of like sidesteps a guy. He had to weave around a Boston player to get in there. Really never broke stride. And then he gets behind the goal line. A Bruin defender has it. And JT is able to put a big hit on his opponent, right? His opponent is trying to move the puck quickly because he knows he's got JT bearing down on him. So the Bruin moves the puck, but it goes into the corner. Mika Zibanejad is there. He intercepts the puck, and then he quickly passes back to Panarin along the boards. And just as quickly, Panarin fires the puck at the net, and he scores. So obviously, absolutely a huge play by JT Miller here. The goal doesn't happen without him doing this. We also certainly have to give some props to Mika Zibanejad and Artemi Panarin, because for this goal to be scored, the two of them needed to be on their toes as well, and certainly both of them were. But again, the entire thing was set up by JT Miller and his hustle and his big hit on the forecheck. And it's funny, I saw somebody say something like this on social media, but, with JT going in on the forecheck the way that he's been doing, you almost kind of forget, like, oh, right, we can do that. We can score goals off of our forecheck, because it has happened so infrequently for the Rangers this season. And then you bring in JT, who this is kind of his calling card, playing this style of hockey. And you see something like this happens, and it's like, oh, right, that is possible. That can happen in a hockey game. The Rangers are capable of doing that. So that was obviously great to see there. That was a huge goal for the Rangers in that spot. That tied the game at 1-1. Or no, that gave the Rangers a 1-0 lead. But it also kind of reminds me of a goal that the Rangers scored against Vegas. And it was kind of the same deal here for JT Miller. Again, JT does not get an assist on this play, the one against Vegas. But to me, he gets kind of an unofficial assist for this one, just like he did in this game here against the Bruins. So what happened in the Vegas game is Lafreniere ends up scoring a goal. But this was all created by JT Miller once again, going into the offensive zone like a bat out of hell, going straight to the net like he's not going to be denied. And when he did that, what happened was the Vegas defenseman had no choice but to go with JT Miller, because you can't just let somebody go uncontested to the front of your net. So the defenseman picked up JT, and while this was happening, Adam Fox had the puck along the boards on the right side, and he passes not to JT, but to Alexis Lafreniere. Lafreniere is back a little bit farther away from the play, but Lafreniere receives the pass. He's got all kind of space and time on this play. He shot the puck pretty quickly, but he had a lot of space. He was in pretty good scoring real estate there as well, and he scored. But again, the entire goal here for Lafreniere was set up by JT Miller going hard to the net and pulling the defenseman along with him. So he's made a massive impact, even on goals that the Rangers are scoring where he doesn't necessarily score the goal or he doesn't get one of the assists. He's still impacting the game, and he's still making it happen. It's just been an absolutely massive pickup for this Ranger team. And I hope that, this season they can still squeak their way into the playoffs, because they do have a different dynamic with JT Miller in the mix. But if they don't get in, at least you've got JT Miller next season and going forward, because he is a heck of a player, an all-around player. Certainly, I think a lot of us had some reservations about JT Miller coming over here, but hopefully, I'll say now what I said then. I think the reward outweighs the risk, and I think we've seen that for the first 3 games that JT has played with the New York Rangers. And beyond that, it's just the little things that we're seeing with JT Miller. It's those little interactions on the ice, things that we really didn't see much of during the Rangers' 2-month nap that they had there in November and December. There was a play stoppage. I think it was right before a power play. And you've got JT out there during a stoppage. He's got Mika next to him. He's got Panarin next to him. He's got Fox in front of him. He's, drawing something up, telling them what he's looking to do and how he wants the Rangers to go about it. So that's great to see, kind of taking the bull by the horns. And then a little bit later in the game, another play stoppage. And it was kind of the same deal, but this time it was Mika. He was talking to JT Miller, and he was talking to Artemi Panarin. And just more interactions like that, where guys are communicating, looking focused into the game, ready to go, the kind of things that we just didn't see for way too long in this Ranger season. And a lot of this goes back to something that we've talked about on here in the past, and that's the very simple fact that I think at times it can be, you can almost get a little bit too comfortable with your teammates. I think at times maybe Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider are like a prime example of that. You need to be a little bit on your toes. You need that guy on your team, honestly, no matter what the sport is, but certainly hockey. You need that guy that is a little bit nuts, that guy that's wired a little bit differently, that guy that is a little bit of a loose cannon, is a little bit of a wild card. Now, there's some risk with that as well, and we've seen that with JT Miller. Certainly he plays with some edge, and he's towed the line, and there's times where I think that fire has kind of worked to his detriment and maybe worked to the team's detriment as well, whatever team he happened to be on at the time. But you need somebody like this. You need somebody that's a little bit of a loose cannon, like I said, and who brings that fire and who brings that energy. You can't get too comfortable with your teammates. And I don't know that anybody can ever really get too comfortable with JT Miller as a teammate. You know, and I don't say that as an insult. I think in a way that's probably a good thing because, like I said, you need to be on your toes and you need somebody that is going to keep you honest out there. And I think JT Miller is certainly that guy. It certainly looks that way for his first 3 games with the New York Rangers. One other thing that I want to point out here as it pertains to JT is we kind of had a question. I went on Locked on NHL, talked to Gil Martin about this. Which Ranger is going to benefit the most from the acquisition of JT Miller? And at the time when I talked to Gil, it was very early. I think it was only 2 games into JT Miller's tenure. And even now we're only 3 games into it. At the time I said Artemi Panarin. I'm going to switch my answer to Mika Zibanejad. And it goes back to what I was just talking about. JT Miller is that guy that's going to go out there and keep you honest. And now Mika Zibanejad is getting the opportunity to play on the same line as JT Miller and Artemi Panarin. So he's in a good spot in the lineup, playing the wing for the first time in forever. You know, on one hand, you'd like to see Mika Zibanejad be that guy that can elevate his teammates. But if nothing else, at least we're getting a little bit more of the old Mika Zibanejad back. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's played with JT Miller. Again, very small sample size. But Mika Zibanejad has now played 3 games since JT Miller has come over. He's been on JT's line for all 3 games. He's on the power play with him as well. And in those 3 games, Mika has a goal and 5 assists. So 6 points in the 3 games. He just looks a little bit more active, looks a little bit more involved. We saw him score what I would call a semi-dirty goal, you know, in the other game. I think it was against Vegas, where the puck was loose behind the goalie, and he got in there, kind of fought his way to the net, and was able to sweep the puck into the net for a goal. That's the one goal that he scored in these 3 games. But I think overall, we're just seeing a better version of Mika Zibanejad ever since the Miller trade. He's also a +1 in that time. He's blocked 5 shots. He's 17-12 on the faceoff circle. He's taking fewer faceoffs now because they've got him at the wing, but still, you know, that's a solid percentage, obviously. I saw some people saying that, like, Mika, he looks terrible in this game. I didn't really get that either. You know, early in this game, I don't know that anybody on either side really looked all that good. Some people were kind of bashing the Rangers for, they're asleep, they're sleepwalking, and this, that, and the other thing. I didn't really hate the Rangers' start to this game. And maybe part of the reason for that is going back to November and December, the bar has kind of been lowered. So maybe now I'm easily impressed compared to what we saw during those 2 months. I don't know. To me, the start of this game was just a little bit of a stalemate. It wasn't anything that the Rangers were doing egregiously wrong. They could have maybe had a little bit more jump in their game for sure. But you know what? They held Boston to 3 shots on goal in the first period. Boston didn't have any good scoring chances. The Rangers didn't have any glaring turnovers. They didn't make any mistakes. I don't believe they took any penalties in the first period. I would have to double check that to know for sure. I don't know. Again, a little bit of a stalemate, and certainly it wasn't the most exciting period of hockey you'll ever see, whether we're talking about Mika Zibanejad or the Rangers as a whole here. But I don't know. I was okay with it. You guys let me know. I didn't think the first period was really as bad as a lot of people were making it out to be. But in just a second, nice to see it once again that Mika Zibanejad is hopefully coming out of it a little bit. Hopefully the best hockey that he's going to play this season is still in front of him. And I think certainly due in part to obviously this acquisition of JT Miller, who just continues to make a massive impact on this Ranger team ever since coming back over here. But in just a second, going to shift our attention to Adam Edstrom. He might be out for the season. At the very least, he's going to be out for a long time. We'll talk about that and how he's done this season and how the Rangers can hope to try to get by without him, fill the void. We'll get to all that good stuff in just a second. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked on New York Rangers. I'm going to go ahead and close out today's episode by talking a little bit about Adam Edstrom and the very simple fact that he might be done for the season. Obviously a tough blow, but the other day, and we know he got injured a couple of games ago, and Jimmy Vesey's been back in Edstrom's spot in the last 2 games here. But the report that came out was that Edstrom was going to be out for 2.5 to 3.5 months. And if we take this as literally as possible, when this announcement was made, you fast forward 2.5 months on the calendar, that would mean that if he comes back at the very start or the very, front end of that timetable, 2.5 months, at that point, there would be 1 game left in the regular season. when Edstrom returns. We've seen guys beat their timetable before. Doesn't mean that Edstrom can't possibly do it. Maybe he does. Certainly, you never want to bet against a hockey player when it comes to them returning from injury at this time or that time or whatever it might be. But for what it's worth, Edstrom has officially been placed on IR. It's really too bad because this fourth line, I think a lot of us have been really impressed with the brand of hockey that they've been playing recently. Even when the Rangers have been struggling overall, it seems like the line that goes out there and consistently does its job has been the fourth line. We even saw Edstrom and Carrick and Rempe, particularly the first two, get in a little bit of a heater as far as like points and goals were concerned. Certainly all three of those guys go out there and play a physical brand of hockey. I think Ranger fans have really had a lot of fun watching this trio in action over the last handful of games here. And it's unfortunate because now Adam Edstrom is not going to get to be a part of that for the foreseeable future and quite possibly the rest of the entire season. Edstrom, last year he was up for 11 games. And honestly, I thought he played fairly well last year as well. He's built on that this year. But, only 11 games last year. This counts as his rookie season. If this is indeed the last we've seen of Edstrom this season, then he closes out what, again, goes into the books as his rookie season with 51 games, 5 goals, 4 assists, -5, average 9 minutes and 16 seconds of ice time, 34 block shots, and 94 hits. And doing that all, once again, as a fourth liner and somebody that gets a limited amount of ice time. So overall, again, I think a solid season here for Adam Edstrom. I do hope that if the Rangers get into the playoffs, maybe he can work his way back into the lineup. We will see. Obviously, a lot of things have to happen for that to come to fruition. But, as far as how the Rangers get by, I think in the short term, you're going to see sort of like a rotation where 2 out of the 3 of Brodzinski, Vesey, and Kaliev will be in the lineup on a nightly basis. I would look for there to be maybe kind of a rotation there. As strange as it sounds, even though Vesey was the one that was the odd man out for a while, I feel like he's the one that, of those 3 players I just mentioned, will be the most entrenched in the lineup, simply because of those 3 players, again, Brodzinski, Vesey, Kaliev, Vesey to me seems to be the one most cut out for a fourth line role. He plays that style of hockey more so than the other 2. So you might see Vesey go from being the odd man out and the guy that was upset about his playing time and the guy that was all but certain to be traded. He might now become a fixture on the fourth line for the foreseeable future. Now, that's at least until the Rangers decide that they want to call somebody up from the AHL to the NHL. That could certainly happen. So short term, I think, that's the plan there. You go with 2 out of 3 of Brodzinski, Kaliev, and Vesey on any given night. Long term, I think you're looking at probably Brennan Othmann or Brett Berard. I feel like it's only a matter of time before one or both of those players is called back up to the Rangers. Now, Brett Berard, for what it's worth, is still injured right now. I believe the last time he played was January 25th. So it doesn't look like a call-up of Berard is all that imminent. But Brennan Othmann, that could certainly happen. He missed time with an injury as well. We'll see if he becomes an option. To me, it's only a matter of time before we see Othmann. It's only a matter of time before he's called up to give this team a little bit of a spark, or if the Rangers do decide to sell off some pieces at the deadline, whether that's Riley Smith, whether that's Jimmy Vesey, possibly Brodzinski, maybe even Kaliev. It would be kind of funny if the Rangers claimed Kaliev and then flipped him for a draft pick later in the season. I mean, I guess that wouldn't be such a bad thing, but I think the Rangers want to actually see what Kaliev can do. I don't know that he'll be traded, but bottom line, if they move out of forward, I think certainly Othmann could be the guy that gets called up and put into that spot, especially if the Rangers, do sell and they're officially labeled as sellers at the trade deadline. And I realize that might sound a little bit funny for a team that just acquired JT Miller. But again, I stand by what I said episodes ago, where the JT Miller acquisition, it's about this season to a degree, but it's more about next season. It's more about retooling this roster and, going forward with him as one of the top players, one of the pillars of Ranger hockey going forward from next season and beyond. But, we'll see how the Rangers look to play it again. You feel for Adam Edstrom because I do think he had a really solid season this year. And barring the Rangers making the playoffs or barring Adam Edstrom making his timetable, it certainly does look like we may have seen the last of him this season. Again, never bet against a hockey player, but the way things stand now, that certainly seems to be the case. While we're talking about the lineup, I want to bring a couple of other things here before we call it. Zach Jones got a game. How about that? Amazing, right? All it took was Urho Vakanainen feeling a little bit under the weather, which apparently he did. That got Zach Jones back into the lineup. When I first saw the lineup, I actually thought that Vakanainen was a healthy scratch. It wasn't until after that where I saw a couple of different beat reporters mentioning that he was under the weather. Look, I'm not going to die on this hill of Zach Jones needing to be in the lineup every single game. But the fact that this is the first time in the last 19 games that Zach Jones has been in the lineup, I think that's a little bit ridiculous. If for no other reason than the very simple fact that at a certain point, don't you want to keep these guys somewhat sharp? Because if the Rangers actually do rally at the end of the season here, win a bunch of games, squeak their way into the playoffs, and Zach Jones is in a situation where he hasn't played since before Christmas, which was the case before this game last night, and you get into the playoffs, and you get into game 6, game 7, and then one of the Ranger defensemen gets an injury, do you really want to throw Zach Jones out there with him not having played hockey for about 5 months, which is what it would be at that point? To me, Zach Jones, again, I'm not going to dug on this hill anymore because I just don't think the Rangers have any kind of major plans for Zach Jones. And I think, Vakanainen has played reasonably well, but at a certain point, you got to get him some reps. You got to get him into a game for that reason that I just mentioned. I mean, is it too much to ask that Zach Jones plays I don't know, once every 8 games, once every 9 games, once every 10 games? That's all I'm asking for at this point. And again, it goes back to that reason that I just mentioned, where I don't think you want your 7th defenseman going ice cold and having not played any hockey, between now and whatever playoff series he might be involved in. That's if the Rangers make it, and that's a whole nother story. It's still going to be certainly an uphill battle to do that. But Pierre Laviolette was asked about Zach Jones after this game. This is what he had to say. I thought he was really good at not just moving the puck and the skating, but for me, it was the way he attacked defensively in the defensive zone, the way he closed. There was extra attitude in what he was doing out there. That's what we've been looking for, too. I thought he really responded with a big game. Sometimes those games can be tougher because you haven't been up to speed. And yeah, I think that's something that Jones deserves credit for. He's been in and out of the lineup so much this season, really throughout all the seasons that he's been a Ranger. It does seem like he tends to hit the ground running again. And again, I'm not trying to make it sound like he's a Norris candidate. He's not. But, he deserves more than one game every 19 games, in my very humble opinion. I know there's some people saying, oh, scratch Ryan Lindgren and put Zach Jones in. They're not going to do that. There's maybe times this season where they should have done that, but they're not going to do that. I've kind of given up on that as well. So we'll just see how they look to play it going forward. We'll see if Laviolette was impressed enough that Jones gets a game every once in a while. The only other thing that I want to mention as it pertains to the Ranger lineup, the second power play unit, specifically Johnny Brodzinski on the second unit over Will Cooley. I don't get that at all. And I like Brodzinski more than most Ranger fans, but you're talking about a guy who only once has had more than 8 points in a season, going over your guy who was breaking out this year and, second round draft pick, homegrown player, somebody that should be a pillar of Ranger hockey going forward. I don't get that either. And I know the second power play unit only gets so much time on the ice, but can't quite figure that one out. Anyway, we'll call it there. Big win for the Rangers. Obviously, as we know, every game is massive going forward, and we'll continue to watch these games from the edge of our seats and hope that the Rangers can crawl their way back into the playoffs. 2 more massive games here before the Four Nations break. But we'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. We are closing in on 4,000 subscribers, so anyone that can help us get there, it would certainly be very much appreciated. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.